Welcome to the MediSoul podcast. I'm your host, Holly Janes, and I'm the founder of MediSoul Wellness. If you want to learn more, go to MediSoulWellness.com. And this is the podcast where we talk about spirituality, meditation, the paranormal, and absolutely everything in between. So wherever you are right now, just take a breath, get comfortable, and let's explore. So what are we going to talk about today? Do ghosts actually exist? I love this topic because ghosts are a fascinating being. They really are. So, do they exist? Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever had a ghost encounter? And if you said yes, well, that kind of answers the question, doesn't it? If you have said no, then let me answer that for you. Yes, ghosts do exist. Think of it this way. You and everybody else has a soul. That soul is what animates your physical body. Your body is alive. Yes, you have organs and tissues and all of that, but you have an energy about you. And that energy is called your life force energy, or chi, or ki, or prana in different countries. What is all that? The energy that makes you alive, which is your soul. When people die, their soul leaves their body. And then they move on, they cross over, they go to the other side. If somebody has a near-death experience, they die, they go to the other side, they come back. So what happens here? Their soul left the body, went somewhere else, came back, and reanimated the body. So when someone fully dies, there's no near-death experience, they just die, the soul steps out of the physical body. If they do not cross over, then they become a ghost. So if we all have souls, and souls are what keep us alive, and souls are what animate us, and souls are what gives us our personalities, our likes, our dislikes, then when a soul leaves a physical body, it becomes a ghost. Once that ghost crosses over to the other side, then they just cross over. There's not a ghost anymore. Ghost is kind of like somebody's soul that is stuck between being alive and being on the other side. They're kind of in this in-between. Some people call it purgatory or whatever you want to call it. They're stuck in an in-between. They're on Earth. They're here. They're next to us. But they're in like a slightly different frequency than we are. So they're not always easy to see because they're in like a slightly different, not dimension, they're in our world. They're just in a different energy. They're in a different frequency. So do ghosts exist? 100%. Yes, ghosts exist. And you know what's funny is there's a lot of people in the world who have seen ghosts. There's a lot. I've seen ghosts. And I'll tell you some of those. But when you have people who have said things like, I've never believed in ghosts, I've never seen one, never believed in one, and then they saw one. And then they go, wow, I didn't believe in ghosts until I saw them. Here's the thing. Just because you didn't see a ghost before doesn't mean they didn't exist. Because your belief has nothing to do with their existence. They exist whether you see them or not. They exist whether you believe in them or not. So not seeing a ghost does not mean they're not real. And chances are most people have seen something that they don't understand what it is, but they rationalize it and just assume, well, this was just some kind of a fluke or my imagination, or I was tired, or it was dust, or I saw something, or it was, whatever you want to tell yourself. But in reality, you probably saw something. And the thing is that the ghosts existed before when you didn't believe in them. And then when you see one and you believe in them and it's like, wow, I believe in ghosts now. That's amazing. These things exist. They always did. So they don't exist based on belief. So let me tell you a couple of stories of things that I have seen. So I've seen probably a handful of ghosts throughout my life, and I'm going to tell you some of them. Okay, so I lived in an apartment once. Now, the way that these apartments were, there were 4 buildings. And the buildings, all of them were haunted. Because I started talking to the other people around. And I lived in 2 particular apartments. And the thing that's kind of crappy is that these apartments were laid out exactly the same on the inside. So I get a little confused on which apartment had which ghost issue. So sometimes I get them a little kind of intertwined because they looked exactly the same. So there's a couple of stories here with this particular location. I lived in an apartment, and when I moved in, I was kind of excited because it really was my first actual apartment that was mine. And I had people that were I would go outside, and there were people that I knew in the town, and they would be outside and they would be like, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Why are you here?" And I said, "Oh, I just moved in." And they're like, "Oh, you did? You moved in here. Where are you living?" And I would point to the apartment I was in, and they would look at me and go, "Oh, you live there." And I was like, "Yeah." And at the time, I was young, so I didn't ask questions. I just was like, that was a weird response. But now I would be like, no, you don't get to say that and walk away. Why are you saying it that way? But I didn't do that. So I was like, yeah, I live there. Now, when I moved in, it was fine. Everything was fine. But little things would start to happen. Like the light would turn on in my bedroom. Whatever. And then the refrigerator door would be left open, which is fine. I had a cat. So, cats jump on the fridge. They open it. It happens. It started to kind of pick up. There would be ghosts in the apartment that, other people would be like, hey, there's something over there. But I would see it kind of in my head. And I didn't know what I was seeing in my head because I hadn't fully understood that the things I was seeing in my head were real. And so there was little things happening all the time. And I would go into my bedroom and there would be this very, I don't know how to explain it, heavy, just very heavy energy. Like, almost like the room was caving in around you kind of feeling. And one time I was sitting in the living room. It was a small apartment and it had 2 bedrooms. And I was watching TV and I saw this girl walk across the second bedroom. And this girl looked like, oh God, like you would picture a typical ghost. She was all white, like glowing almost. She wasn't really solid, and it was not something that I got to see very clear. It wasn't a clear visual because I wasn't expecting it, but the way that she walked in the room, she was coming out of where the closet would have been and just walked across the room. And I saw her. And I was like, okay, what the heck was that? So I didn't really know. And then I remember seeing this shadow person. I don't know what else to call it. And this was interesting because it was in the same apartment, or one of these 2 apartments anyway. There was this shadowy looking person, I guess you could say. So it was probably about 6 or 7 o'clock at night. I was sitting on my bed in my bedroom, and it was the first apartment. This was the one I was sitting in. So I was sitting there and I was, reading. And there was somebody else in the apartment. The light was on in the hallway, and it was a very small hallway. It was one of those apartments where it was kind of a square, and you had one bedroom and this tiny little hallway, and the next bedroom was like not even 2 feet away from the door, so they were really close to each other. So the hallway was tiny. And this shadow person was standing in the hallway but leaning into the bedroom. And it was as if you took a person who didn't have any hair and you made them a 3D shadow. That's what it looked like. It looked like a 3D shadow. It did not have a hat on. It had a bald head. It didn't have ears. And its hands looked like mittens. And I know this because I'm sitting there reading and I saw movement. So I look up and I see this 3D shadow person with the majority of their body in the hallway, but they were leaning into the bedroom and they moved their head around like they were looking around. They like looked up and looked down and looked all around. And I'm just sitting there watching this thing look around. And after a moment, I was like, you do know I can see you, right? Well, apparently it didn't, because it got all scared and rigid and it stood straight up and vanished. I don't know. You want to call that a ghost? I don't know what it was. In the same one of the two apartments that I lived in, there was a boy. I saw a boy. He was, man, maybe like 6 to 7 years old. He was wearing clothes from the late 1800s to early 1900s. He had knickers on, you know, those pants from back then. It looked like he was in a little 3-piece suit without the coat, is what it looked like. And he was standing in my bedroom doorway. And I woke up and I sat up for whatever reason. I woke up in the middle of the night and I kind of sat up and I looked and I saw this boy, this kid just standing in my doorway, and he glowed. It was weird. And it was like almost like a brown tint to him, but you could see through him. The weird thing with this kid is his eyes were like headlights. They glowed like headlights. It was odd. So I lay back down and I'm thinking, okay, I've got to be dreaming. There's no way I just saw this. And so I opened my eyes again, and that freaking kid was standing right next to me, looking down at me with his little glowing headlight eyes, and freaked me out. And I flew across the bed and turned on the light, and he was gone after I had a meltdown. And I'm like, how is this kid tall enough to look down on me? I don't know, but he did. And it freaked me out because his eyes glowed like headlights. I can see this right now in my head. It's so clear. It's so weird. There were times in the second apartment in that complex that I lived in that I would hear people talking. And I don't mean like 2 or 3 people having a conversation. This was like a party that was going on. And I would hear it all the time. But it would always kind of stop. So it would wake me up, but then it wouldn't be there. And one night I woke up and I heard people talking. So I sat up and I sat there for a minute and I heard it. It was like being in a room with a lot of people and you get that murmur kind of talking where everybody's talking. So it doesn't really sound like anything but a bunch of people talking. And that's what it sounded like. And I sat there and I could hear it. So I got up, I went out to the bedroom door, and when I opened it, I went into the living room area and it stopped. It was just silence. I was like, whatever, I don't know what this is. So I ended up going into the bathroom, shut the door, and it started again. I could hear the people talking again. At this point, I am nowhere near sleeping. I opened the bathroom door and it got quiet again. If you want to know anything about me, after a while I get fed up with things and then I confront it. This was one of them. So I went into the hallway facing the living room and I said, if you are going to have parties in here, then you have 2 choices. You either invite me or you start paying rent. One or the other. Otherwise, shut up. And I went back to bed. And I never heard it again. So, does that see a ghost? No. Did I hear it? Yes. Now, let's go back to that first apartment that I lived in, because I told you I saw a girl walk by the room. Let me tell you why. People figured out where I lived. And like I said, they said, oh, you live there. Okay. So I ended up going to a seance one time. And I didn't want to participate in the seance. It was a table tipping kind of a seance where you put your hands on top of a small table and it just tips back and forth and whatever. And all I wanted to do was take pictures. I didn't want to be a part of it. And while I was there and the other people were doing the table tipping, I was sitting on the edge of the couch. We were in somebody else's house. This was not my house. And I started seeing all of these beings walking into the room. Like I was seeing these things. And then these two people was a man and a woman. The man had a beard, brown hair, short hair. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. He was kind of a little round, like a little bit pudgy. And then the girl had blonde hair, bangs, and it was maybe a little shorter than shoulder length. And she was wearing a dress. And if I remember right, it was a black dress with flowers on it. And they were standing there looking down at me. And they were saying to me, our car broke down. Can you help us? Can you help us? And I'm just sitting there looking up at these people in complete shock, not saying a word, just looking at these people thinking, what the heck am I looking at? Because these guys didn't glow, but they were kind of see-through. And while they're talking to me, other ghosts are walking into the room behind them. Mind you, these people are still doing their table tipping, not having a clue that I'm having this whole experience over here. And so I'm looking at these two people, and the guy looked at me and he goes, hey, what is wrong with you? Our car broke down. Can you please help? And I'm just staring at him like, what is happening? And then somebody said something in the room which made me turn my head. And when I turned back, everything was gone. Everything was back to normal. So I was just sitting there like, okay. Well, that same night, people were taking a break from the table tipping. So I decided I want to try the table tipping. So I was going to do it with me and one other person. And that was it. And so I was like, how do I do this? So I sat down, we put our hands on the table, and then, did whatever we had to do. Honestly, I don't even remember. Because what I remember is right away, it was like I was no longer in that room doing the table tipping. I was now in my apartment. And I was looking up, and I was looking up at the ceiling. And it was daylight. And mind you, during the time we were doing the table tipping, it was night. But in this vision, it was as if I was there. And it was daylight, and I was looking at the ceiling. And I started looking. It's like I'm panning from where I'm looking more. I'm looking at more of the ceiling that's going into the room. So I'm realizing that I'm standing in a doorway. And as I'm looking at the ceiling, more towards the other side of the ceiling to the other side of the wall, I'm noticing these red dots. And then there was more red dots and more red dots. And I freaked out, pushed myself back, threw myself on the floor to try and get out of it, which did not help. And I was freaking out because I was like, I did not want to see this. And then, people were like, what the heck is happening? And tried to, help me up. But at that point, I had already seen this entire scene. So what I saw was somebody was dead in a box that was made of wood, that was in the shape of a square. They bled out into this box, and there was a light on in the closet. And I was like, I don't want to deal with this. So I realized this was my bedroom, the one that I was living in at that time. And so I left that seance. I went to my home and I went into my closet and I looked up at the ceiling, and there was a place to put a light bulb. There was no string or anything, but there was a place to put a light bulb. I didn't even know that was in there. So the next day, I'm pretty sure it was the next day, I went over to the manager's apartment, who lived in the next building over, and I knocked on the door. And I was, friendly with this guy. And he opens the door, and the first thing I said to him is, "What happened in my apartment?" And he just looked at me and he was like, "Oh, come in." And I was like, "What happened?" And he's like, "What do you know?" And I said, "Here's what happened." And I told him that I went to a seance. I explained what I saw. I explained, the square box, the light. I said, "What happened?" He told me that before, like a few years before I lived there was a couple that lived in there. They were relatively young, somewhere, I'm going to say around 24 years old. And he wasn't very nice to her. So the manager told her, if you ever need help or whatever, just call me. Remember, we had landlines. Nobody had cell phones. So he said, if you need help, just call. And then the manager said that one day him and his friend were going out to the parking lot because they needed to go to the store. So as they were walking out, they heard these loud bangs. And they thought, wow, is that thunder? I didn't know it was going to rain. And then they drove off. They went to the store. 3 days later, there was a knock on the manager's door, and it was the police of the town that were saying, "We need you to do a wellness check. We need to get into that apartment. No one's heard from these people in a few days." So the manager's wife went over there with a key, and she put the key in the door, unlocked the door, she twisted the knob, opened the door. The cop standing behind her grabbed her, pulled her back, went inside the apartment, shut the door, and locked it because he was at an angle where he could see what was in the apartment, and she didn't. So the cops went in. The two people that lived there, the man had killed his girlfriend with a shotgun. And so my manager's telling me this story. And I said, "Okay, why?" And he said he was abusive. She was leaving him. And he held a shotgun to her head, and it went off. And I said, "What's the wooden box? I don't understand." And he said she fell to the left of her, and they had a waterbed, which are made out of wood. It's the wooden box. And he said she filled up the waterbed. And then he must have gone over and touched her somehow, because he ended up walking into the hallway, putting his hand on the closet door, the other bedroom wall, door, the frame, the bathroom door, the faucets in the bathroom, because there were blood all over them, went back to the doorway, and then took his own life with that shotgun. What I saw was from his last point of view, the last thing he saw when he looked up at the ceiling. So I saw the whole scene, and even though this was years ago, this scene is vivid in my head. So I asked my manager, I said, "So did you guys change the walls?" And he's like, "Yes." He had to clean up that room. So he had a lot of trauma with that. And I said, "Okay, so you took out the walls." And he's like, "Yes." And he's like, "But not the window and not the ceiling." And I looked at him and I'm like, I painted that window. It's the same window. And he's like, "Yeah, that's the same window." And I was like, you gotta be kidding me with this whole situation. So he validated what I saw in a seance, and all of it was true. So when I saw the ghost who looked all white walking out of the closet one day, that was her. And the ominous feeling that I always got in my bedroom, besides the fact there was a murder-suicide in it, was him, because he was in there. And the message I always got from him was, I didn't mean to do it. And that was what he would say over and over and over and over and over. That was the thought that I kept getting, is I didn't mean to do it. And when I talked to the manager's wife about it, she told me, she goes, I got the same message. And I went home and I told this ghost, I said, listen, I don't care that you didn't mean to do it. I don't care. You held a loaded gun to your girlfriend's head, and whether it went off accidentally or not is irrelevant. I am not on your side at all here. So I moved out of that apartment, moved into another apartment in the same place, had the same type of problems. At least there wasn't a murder-suicide in that apartment, but it had the same kind of ghost stuff and hauntings, and all kinds of weird things were always going on. And it actually became mundane. So the question here is, do ghosts exist? Yeah, they do. Some people experience them more than others. It really doesn't have anything to do with your belief system. It really doesn't. It's not like, well, I don't believe in them, so I'm never going to see them. Or I don't believe in them, so they don't exist. It doesn't work that way. It's like saying I don't believe in rocks, so rocks don't exist. Like, no, they still exist, whether you believe in them or not. Ghosts exist as well. Some people, either they do see them and they tell themselves they don't, or they don't see them because they're just not open to it. Some people are just not open to seeing these things. They don't care. They don't want to. It's not an interest of theirs. So they just kind of ignore it. And then there are people who are open. And I'm one of them. And I've seen them. And there are lots and lots of people who have seen ghosts. And you can tell them or ask them, did you believe in them? And maybe they'll say yes. Maybe they'll say no. Whatever, they've got lots of people out there that go, I didn't believe in ghosts, and then I saw one. Okay, well, they exist. Do they exist? Yes, 100%. Ghosts exist. Have you seen ghosts? Have you had an experience? Because a lot of people have. Like, way more people have had experiences with ghosts than have not. So the question is no longer, do they exist? We need to get past that. We need to just accept the fact that ghosts are a part of our reality. And when you do, that's when you can start figuring out how do you help them. Because we need to get past this. Do they exist? Yes, they exist. You could read up 50 million stories. There's YouTube channels on it, books on this, podcasts on this. There are so many people telling stories about ghosts. Do they exist? Yes. What are we going to do with this very large population of ghost problem that we have? These are people. Ghosts are not monsters. Ghosts are not scary. They do scary things, don't get me wrong, but they are people. And they need to cross over to the other side. So why haven't they? They don't know how. If they did, they would. Some ghosts figure it out and they cross over right away. Some don't. And there's a whole lot of topic about ghosts. But what we need to start normalizing is ghost therapy. Honestly, is start looking at these ghosts and realizing this is a person. And just like people can be jerks, ghosts can be jerks. If somebody is a jerk in life, they're a jerk in death. It's just the way that it is. Sometimes these people are stuck in death and they get so annoyed that they can't get out, they become jerks. Some of them don't know that they're dead and they're just running around trying to figure out what the heck is happening and why is no one talking to them. Some of them don't want to cross over. So there's a lot of different types of ghosts. We need to start looking at these people and going, okay, you are a ghost. You need to cross over. That doesn't mean you start yelling at them. They are people. How would you like it if you didn't know you were dead and somebody came yelling at you to tell you to get out? You wouldn't like it, and they don't like it either. And you might have a ghost in your house that's a jerk. Okay, well, he was a jerk in life because that's how they are. You need to get them to cross over. You don't need to push them out into the world and get them out of your house. You need to get them to cross over to the other side. Ask for spirit guides to come down and help cross them over. Not every ghost is a demon. That's not how that works. Ghosts are just people who haven't found their way to the other side. It's all that they are. Try to normalize this. Because once you normalize that a ghost is a person and that they're just trying to find their way to the other side or whatever it is they're trying to do, it makes it easier to deal with them. The way you would treat people with therapy, ghosts are still people. You kind of do the same thing. Some of them want to be heard. Some of them feel like, nobody's paying attention. I've seen so many videos on YouTube where people go into haunted places and they're like, if you need help, knock. And they knock. And then the people get scared and run away. And I'm like, where are you going? You asked. If they need help, they said yes. Why are you running away? Because you don't know what to do. This is important. You need to learn what to do. Because could you just imagine what it would be like if right now everything that you're looking at is actually death and you don't know it and someone else is the living? Like, you think the ghost in your house is the dead and you're the living, but what if they're the living and you're the dead? Would you want them yelling at you to get out of your house that you paid money for, but so did they? They paid money for that house too. You see, these are people. Some of them are jerks, some of them are not, but they're still people. They need to cross over. That's what needs to happen here. Ask spirit guides to come down and say, listen, I need you to help cross this ghost over. And you're going to tell the ghost, listen, you need to go to the other side. Okay? I'm going to ask my spirit guides to come down. Whether you talk to your spirit guides or not doesn't matter. They listen to you. And you're going to tell them, I'm going to ask my spirit guides to come down. And I'm going to ask them to help take you to the other side. You need to go because that's where you need to be. You don't need to be a jerk about it. You don't need to be yelling at them. You don't need to be demanding. You don't need to start screaming and yelling. You just need them to go over. And one of the things you can tell them is whatever you're looking for here is over there. If you go over there, I won't be there. So you can get away from me because sometimes the ghosts don't want you around. And they're trying to get you out of their house. So you can tell them, go over there and you can have your house and I won't be in it. And that makes them happy and they'll go. If they're looking for family, chances are the family is on the other side. Whatever it is, just be like, whatever you're looking for, whatever you need, whatever you want, go to the other side. I'm going to ask my spirit guides to come down and help you cross over. Okay? That's all that needs to happen. That's it. Just get them to the other side. Let's stop leaving these poor people living in this limbo existence and let's get them over to where they belong. Because like I said in the beginning, these are souls and these souls need to cross over to continue on their journey. That's it. So I want to sum this up by saying, do ghosts exist? I'm pretty sure you have figured out my answer is yes. Ghosts exist. If you've seen them, if you work with them, if you're doing any kind of haunting, let's start crossing them over. They need your help. Even if they're mean, they need your help. Protect yourself. Get spirit guides involved. That's all you need to do. So I want to say thank you for being here. And if you're interested in learning more about MediSoul Wellness, All of the information is in the show notes, including how to get started with my school for free. My name's Holly, and I'll talk to you next time.